We made it. We got it. Last one. Last one. All right. So previous video, 9.6.1, talked about discriminants and what the discriminant meant about how many solutions there were in an equation. Today, we're going to actually figure out what those solutions are. So we're going to start by finding the discriminant of this equation. Again, the discriminant is defined as b squared minus 4ac, where a, b, and c are the numbers in the equation. The equation has to equal 0, which it does here. So my a value is 3, my b value is 8, c is -9, b squared is 64, because that's 8 times 8. And if I were to multiply 3 times -9, that would give me -27. So to find the discriminant, we are going to do b squared minus 4ac. B squared is 64. AC is -27. So I'm going to go ahead and type that in the equation. Type in the calculator. So I get 172. So just to recap what that means, the discriminant is 172 does not mean 172 is the solution. What that means is a positive discriminant tells me there are 2 solutions to the equation, which is what we just found. So our discriminant was positive 172, so there are 2 solutions. A negative discriminant means that there are no solutions. And a discriminant that's exactly equal to 0 means that there is 1 solution to the equation. Okay? So what we're going to get into today is how to actually find those solutions. And in order to do that, we're going to use what's called the quadratic formula. Now, there's a ton of videos on YouTube that you can search. If you just Google or YouTube quadratic formula song, there's hundreds of videos of like ways to remember this equation. This is a big, long, a kind of an intimidating equation. And by replacing all the A's, B's, and C's with the numbers from the equation, we can find the solutions to a quadratic equation, just like we did with factoring, and before that with square roots. Now, the way this is read is x is equal to the negative b, or the opposite of b. This symbol right here means plus or minus. And the plus or minus sign is where I get the 2 solutions from. So one solution will be negative b plus and then the square root, and the other solution will be negative b minus the square root. And we'll get into that a little bit more in a little while. But just understand that that symbol means plus or minus. And then we have the square root of b squared minus 4ac. And all of that is being divided by 2a. Now, that's a lot to remember, but if you recognize that this b squared minus 4ac is that discriminant that we spent the previous video working on, I like to write the quadratic formula like this instead. Negative b plus or minus the square root of the discriminant divided by 2a. It's much shorter, it's easier to remember, and if you're worried about this, negative b divided by 2a, we actually did that with line of symmetry and vertex way back in 9.1 and 9.2. You may not remember it, but you have seen negative b over 2a before. So what that means is we're going to use this version. I'm going to use, for this video, I'm going to use this version of the formula to find the solutions once I know what the discriminant value is. Okay, so here's what this is going to look like, and I have this pasted on every page just so we can remind ourselves. So here's how this would look. The first part of the process. Now here's the thing. We actually already did this problem. This was the warm-up. So I'm just going to write down all the things. I'm going to go ahead and calculate the discriminant down here just to save myself some space since we have more work to do now. 64 minus 4 times negative 27, and we found that our discriminant, I'm pretty sure, was 172. Yep, it was 172. So what I'm going to do now with that number of 172, okay, that is the number that's going to go underneath the square root right here. So the square root of D will become the square root of 172. So here's what this is going to look like now. I have X equals the opposite of B. My B value was positive 8, so the opposite of that's going to be negative 8, plus or minus the square root of 172, which is the discriminant. We already found that down here, divided by 2A. A was 3, so double that, and I get 6. Okay. Now, a positive discriminant means there are two solutions. So there are going to be two answers to this problem. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and square root 172 right now. And you are going to get a lot of decimals for this. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and call that 13.11. So I'm going to round to the hundredth place. So what this becomes now is negative 8 plus or minus 13.11 divided by 6. Okay. And now that I have it written like that, what I'm going to do is there's actually two solutions there. So in order to find those solutions, I'm going to break that this fraction up into two separate fractions. I'm going to do negative 8 plus 13.11 divided by 6. And the other solution is negative 8 minus 13.11 divided by 6. Now I'm just going to type this in the calculator. But what is so important is because the negative 8 and the 13.11 are in the top of the fraction, you need to make sure you hit enter after you type this in. So plus 13.11, hit enter, now divided by 6. If you try to type it all in one step, you will not get the correct answer because it will divide before it adds. So 0.85, that is one of my two solutions. The other solution is negative 8 minus 13.11, and then divided by 6. So negative 3.52 is what that would round to if I'm rounding to the hundredth place, because it's 3.51, and then the 8, since the 8 is 5 or more, that bumps the 1 up to the next number, so 3.52. These are the two solutions to this quadratic equation. Okay. Now, what I want to show you, let's do it on Desmos. I wasn't going to do Desmos here, but let's do Desmos real quick. If I type the equation 3x squared plus 8x minus 9, okay, 3x squared plus 8x minus 9, I get this parabola, which we knew it was a parabola already, okay? But notice that this parabola crosses the x-axis. It has a height of 0, or a y value of 0 in two spots. One's right here and one's right here. And if I click on this, Desmos tells me that it's negative 3.519, which we got, did I mess something up? Oh, negative 3.5. Yep, I just didn't write the negative on the iPad. So negative 3.519, which we called negative 3.52. And then the other answer is 0.852, which we just called 0.85. Okay, so what you are doing when you are doing this quadratic formula is you are finding the numbers. You are finding the numbers that you could replace x with and get 0 for an answer. Okay, so those are the two solutions that we have for that problem. Now, I know this problem took a little bit of time because the first time you see this, it does take a little bit. But if you go through the work of finding the discriminant first, this will be so much easier on you in the long run, and it's a much quicker calculation, and there's less silly mistakes that can happen. So let's try this again. Let's take a look at what happens here if I have negative 2x squared plus 8x plus 12 equals 0. Again, I need to see the equals 0, but now I can start labeling A, B, and C. So negative 2, positive 8, positive 12. B squared is going to be 64 because that's 8 times 8. And if I multiply A times C, I get negative 24. So now I'm going to find the discriminant, which is B squared, 64, minus 4AC. And AC is negative 24. 64 minus 4AC gives me 160. So what that tells us is I will have two solutions because the discriminant is a positive number, and I'm going to go ahead now and plug in 160 underneath the square root in this quadratic formula. So x equals the opposite of b, again, is negative 8, plus or minus the square root of 160 divided by 2a. Well, a is negative 2, so if I double that, that's negative 4. Okay, so now I have negative 8. Here's what I'm going to do to kind of keep this a little shorter. I'm going to go ahead and split this up right away. Negative 8 plus, but I'm not going to write the square root of 160. I'm going to go ahead and type that in the calculator. Let's see what decimal we get. Square root of 106, 12.7. 12.649, so that'll be 12.65. And now we're ready to type this into the calculator. So negative 8 plus 12.65 divided by negative 4. Make sure you hit enter before. Make sure you hit enter before you divide. So negative 1.1625. So negative 1.16 is one solution. And if I do negative 8 and then subtract 12.65 and then divide by negative 4, that will give me 5.1625 or 5.16. So those are my two solutions to this problem. Again, those are the two numbers that I could plug in for x and get. Those are the two numbers that I could plug in for x and get 0 in the equation. Wow. All right. So I just want to show you real quick what happens if the discriminant is 0. So I'm telling you right now the discriminant is going to end up being 0. And I want to show you why that means we only have one solution. So negative 2, 16, negative 32. 16 times itself is 256. And negative 2 times negative 32 is positive 64. So if I find my discriminant value, which is b squared minus 4ac, where ac is 64, 256 minus 4 times 64 should be 0. Let's double check to make sure I didn't do something silly. 64 and 0. So the discriminant value is 0, okay? Which, according to our table from earlier, means there's only one solution. But let's see why that is. So the opposite of b is the opposite of 16, which is negative 16, plus or minus the square root of the discriminant divided by 2 times a. If a is negative 2, then 2a is negative 4. So I'm going to go ahead and split this up. I get negative 16 plus the square root of 0 is 0. And I can't forget the minus version. But here's why we say there's only one solution. If I do negative 16 plus 0, it's negative 16. Divided by negative 4 is going to give me 4. If I do the other one, negative 16 minus 0, again, I'm subtracting 0, so it's still negative 16. And then I divide by negative 4, and I'll get positive 4 here. So even though we split it up and we have two solutions, it's the same thing twice, which is why we say there is only one solution. And that one solution is x equals 4. You do not need to write it twice. Later on in later math classes, you'll talk about what it means if the same answer shows up multiple times. But for this problem, the reason that we say a 0 discriminant has only one solution is because you end up getting the same number doubled, or same number twice. Okay. Just to reiterate, when you are finding solutions, please, please, please hit enter after you add or subtract, but make sure you hit enter before you divide. Okay. Can't tell you enough about, if we were to go back just real quick, if I wanted to type this answer in to my calculator and I did all in one step, 12.65, and I divided by -4, and I typed it all in one step, I'd get negative 11.1625, which is not the same as what we got here. Okay, so make sure when you are calculating, you hit enter after you add or subtract, and then you go ahead and divide by the number on bottom. That's going to do it. Really, this quadratic formula is find the discriminant, and then if the discriminant is positive or 0, if D equals 0 or D equals a positive number, plug in to X equals opposite of B plus or minus the square root of discriminant over 2A. Bam! That's it. That's crazy. Done making videos. That's more a message for me than for you.